It can be difficult to explain Yom Kippur to the unfamiliar or uninitiated. There are so many aspects of this day which cause those that we tell about it to sometimes pause what they're saying and contemplate, sometimes slightly cock their head in confusion as they process what we've told them, sometimes for eyes to go a little bit wide as though they didn't quite hear us correctly, and sometimes, often, to hear them utter a non-judgmental but significant, huh. We fast from food and drink for an entire day, from sunset to sunset, we tell them. We refrain from showering, from brushing our teeth, for any of those kind of daily things. We wear predominantly white clothing and no leather products, certainly nothing informal, certainly nothing too revealing. Worship services, we've got plenty. An evening service, a morning service, an afternoon service, study sessions, a late afternoon memorial service, a concluding service at sundown. On their own, of course, we know that none of these particulars are too much to handle, but when put all together, it's understandable why hearing how much is packed into a single day might elicit some surprise, even shock. So many of us, I'm sure, offer follow-up information to explain all of those things just a little bit better. We fast because, well, it's commanded to us right there in the Torah, and because it reminds us of the suffering and the hardship of others, and that throughout the day as our hunger rises, it helps us focus our minds and our souls, not only our bodies for once. Oh, and if it might cause our own bodily harm, we are, of course, commanded not to fulfill that. For these commandments are for us to live by, says God, not to die by. We avoid showering and teeth brushing and all of that because unless it is truly about health and wellness, it's really just a little bit about vanity. For one day, we can and should set aside worrying about maybe a little bad breath or a shiny face or natural aroma. Our clothing symbolizes a kind of purity, something unmarred and unstained, a metaphor for the kind of person that we aim to be in this new year that's now underway. And all those prayer services, it's because there's too much to say and pray and sing and contemplate and come to terms with and resolve to do better. Too much for one service to contain it all. And no one service alone could imbue the entire day with its spiritual potential. Perhaps the most jarring explanation that can get offered about Yom Kippur is this, that it is a metaphorical rehearsal for our own deaths, in what we wear, in what we prioritize and give importance to, in how our bodies feel almost hollowed out, bone dry by the end of the day, in how we spend our precious and valuable time. Yom Kippur is a day that is busy and filled to the brim, but mostly with things that require little movement other than rising and sitting. It's exhausting, but it's exhausting in the same way that it's exhausting to take a long flight when we're not the ones lugging luggage or flying the plane. It's an internal exhaustion, because that's how spiritual and emotional spaces and the hard work that we do inside of them tend to work. Over the past 10 days, since the weighty but joyful blessings and rituals and celebrations of Rosh Hashanah, until now, we've been building towards this Day of Atonement, when all sorts of contradictions of the human experience are not only laid bare, but lovingly welcomed, so that we can be encouraged to embrace them, perhaps differently than other days. Yom Kippur beckons us with so many contradictions. We sing outwardly and we recite ancient words, but it's all about internally attuning ourselves to some sort of spiritual level. We reflect on thoughts and words and actions of the past, but because we want to stay focused on the prospects of the future. Where we are finally honest this day about our own shortcomings and the increasingly concerning state of the world around us, Yet nevertheless, all of that in order to recommit ourselves to hope, so that each of us and all of us can someday be our potential selves. Each year, it's both a little bit of the same and entirely different. As the poet Heraclitus wrote, no person ever steps into the same river twice, because it's not the same river and you're not the same person. Another contradiction of sorts that goes right along with Yom Kippur. It is undeniable how important this day is to our people. Voices from the past and into the present have always recognized Yom Kippur as the most sacred day of the year. But even if that has been settled as an understanding for innumerable generations, it still always raises questions each and every time this season comes around. For some, the central question of Yom Kippur is, always will be, what is the point of all of this? To answer that, I point towards chapter 8 of Mishnah Yoma, where we read, as is common, for sins between a person and God, Yom Kippur, this day atones, but for sins between a person and another person, Yom Kippur does not atone until one has made peace with the other. For others, and I count myself among these, the bigger question really is, what does the author of this book of life intend for me, for all of us, to once again, or perhaps finally, learn? There is no single answer, but this too comes through clearly in some of our most beloved and most excitingly guiding Jewish texts and what they prescribe to us in terms of courses of action. Maimonides, Rambam, in his halachic code Mishnah Torah, says that we must go face to face with the ones that we have hurt and ask forgiveness sincerely, 3 times if needed. The 20th century Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel reminded us that ritual without ethics is empty. The 19th and 20th century Reformed Jewish thinker Rabbi Leo Beck said something similar, that the true essence of atonement is repairing broken connections with other human beings. These are stunningly beautiful thoughts and ideas and ethics, especially when looked at in the framework of our entire tradition and what it means for us to be an Am, a people. Across the entire spectrum of Jewish life and tradition, whether one considers themselves a Reformed Jew, a conservative Jew, an Orthodox Jew, a humanist Jew, a post-denominational Jew, or any other adjective, the message of this day is clear. Relationships are what matter the most. And our task today is not to simply go inside ourselves and to do that work through God. In those texts and so many more, from across an expanse of time and space, we are reminded over and over again that God, the ruler of the universe, the creator of heaven and earth, God is ready to forgive us for sins against God instantly, but when we have wronged another person, God will not step in. That is each of our responsibilities. It brings us to the second meaning, I believe, of this day. Yom Kippur is not only about me and God, it is about me and you. What is this day really about? What is the purpose of all these things that we do? What does the author want us to remember? I don't have one answer. I don't think anybody does. But here's what I do know. I know that Yom Kippur is not a test of physical endurance. It's not about showing God how long we can stand being without food or water or coffee. It's not about checking boxes of which prayers have been duly recited. It is not an escape hatch or a loophole to allow whatever it is that we've done in the past to simply happen again, and we'll just atone next year. The purpose of Yom Kippur is for us to emerge at sundown tonight, freshly reoriented to the pursuit of life well lived. A life made truly happy not by wealth, not by fame, not by achievement, but by the fullness of deep and meaningful relationships. Relationships that we commit to tenderly and carefully maintaining. That is the task of this day. That is our North Star. That is the day's purpose. But how can we possibly define what that means, a life well lived? It is such a subjective idea, with subjective goals and objectives for every individual who examines it and pursues it? I suggest that the answer can only be attained when we first acknowledge what waits for each of us eventually, our own death. There's plenty of that in Yom Kippur liturgy. To understand life, we have to recognize what it is that we are holding it up against to compare. To help us, as we talked about earlier and heard, is this centerpiece prayer of the High Holy Days, Unatana Tokef. The room grows quiet and still when these words are sung, because the prayer confronts us with a raw fragility of life. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, on Yom Kippur it is sealed. How many shall pass away? How many shall be born? Who shall live? Who shall die? Who in the fullness of years? Who before their time? Who by fire? Who by water? Who by sword? Who by beast? And on and on. The imagery is stark. It's almost unbearable. Fires and floods, war and disease, violence, even just accidents. For some of us, the words land too hard and too literally. And for others, they simply evoke the headlines of the past year. But notice what the prayer does next. It does not leave us drowning in fate. It interrupts itself with a claim whispered through the centuries, but teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah, repentance or return, prayer and acts of justice, those have the power to mitigate, to soften the decree. And here again we see that the core of this day is about relationships and connections with others. Because Unatana Tokef does not promise immortality. It doesn't say that these acts will erase tragedy. It just insists that how we live matters. Our choices shape not only our lives, but the lives of others. The prayer insists that we understand and remember every minute that life is fragile, but it is also profoundly meaningful. So this is a reorientation that we take on Yom Kippur, that we remember, even if just once a year, that we cannot control how many days we have, but we can, to many extents, control how we fill those days. That brings us to one of the other great questions. If our time is limited, if life is fragile, and if we know about our own mortality, what is it that really makes life worth living? For centuries, our tradition has answered with all sorts of wisdom. But mostly it says this, that a life of mitzvot, or obligations, of covenant with God, of connection with others, that is what makes life worth living. In the Talmud in Ta'anit 5, Rabbi Yitzchak, one of our sages, tells a story, and he says in it, a person should always pray that peace dwell in their relationships, for the world endures only through peace. And if you've ever taken an elementary math class, you know that this means the world enduring through peace means that each of us must make good relationships ourselves. Later in the same book, Ta'anit, we're taught that when a person is in sorrow, that they should not separate themselves from the community, because to live well is to live not apart, but together with those who can support you. Ecclesiastes declares that two are better than one, for if one falls, the other will lift them up. And the psalmist proclaims in their love poems to God how good and how pleasant it is for people to dwell together. But perhaps the most striking confirmation of this ancient wisdom that I have found in the last few weeks comes from a source completely outside of our own tradition. The longest running study of human life ever conducted, which I mentioned a few weeks ago on Shabbat, which is called the Harvard Adult Development Study. For over 80 years now, researchers have tracked the lives of hundreds of people, first men, and now also women, from age 18 until they die, through their experiences in war or in peace, through their own triumphs and failures, through their own individual health issues and illnesses. They were measured in terms of blood pressure and income and cholesterol and IQ and family history, all the metrics that you might imagine would play into this idea of how happy somebody is. And after decades, the results came back clear and simple. The number one predictor of happiness and health across a lifetime is the quality of our relationships. Not wealth, not fame, not professional success, not even diet or exercise alone, important as they are. What matters most is whether we are connected deeply, tenderly, and enduringly to others, whether we can count on them and they know that they can count on us, whether our lives are woven into a web of love. This sounds remarkably like Torah, like rabbinic law, like Psalms, like prophecy. Our ancestors intuited what scientists today are telling us is proven, that the good life is not a solitary life, but a relational life. This insight is especially precious, I think, to Reform Judaism. For many of our earliest thinkers, Yom Kippur was not simply about trembling before a distant God, but about renewing this covenant with one another. We are taught to hear in the ancient liturgy an ethical call that God cares about how we treat others here and now, that we mitigate life's hardship and sadness with teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah, which are all naturally and absolutely necessarily related to other people. When we say teshuvah, it's not about turning back only to God, it's about turning back also to each other, about repairing friendships and restoring trust and mending what has become broken. Tefillah, prayer, is not only about praising our Creator, it's about recentering ourselves and softening our egos, about cultivating a bit of humility so that we can show up more for others. And when we say tzedakah, justice, righteous giving, it's not about charity. It's about ensuring that every relationship, even with strangers, is suffused with dignity. In Jewish thought, the High Holy Days are not only about life after death, but about life before death, about how we live with one another here and now. And let's be honest, relationships are hard work. If they are the source of our deepest joy, they are also sometimes the source of our deepest and sharpest pain. How many of us come into this room carrying the ache of an estrangement, whether it's a sibling we no longer speak with, a friend we've lost in a misunderstanding, a parent or a child where words that were spoken cannot easily be taken back? Teshuvah, repentance, asks us to try again. And our tradition is clear. Once again, Yom Kippur atones for sins between ourselves and God, but not for sins between one human and another until we make peace with one another. This is a radical teaching. It means that we cannot fast our way out of cruelty. We cannot pray our way out of gossip. We cannot chant our way out of neglect. Instead, we have to go, panim el panim, face to face, and try to repair things. Not all relationships can be restored, though. It's important to recognize that. Sometimes the harm is too deep, or the other person is gone, or reconciliation just wouldn't be safe. But where there is possibility, Yom Kippur presses us, demands us to take it, because the fullness of life depends on the fullness of our relationships. If teshuvah is the work of repair, then the Harvard study reminds us of the work of maintenance. Good relationships do not thrive on autopilot. They require tenderness, intention, and constant care. Think of how we often mistreat our most important relationships, assuming that they will simply endure without effort, coming home exhausted and giving our energy to screens instead of people, assuming that people know we love them without saying it, letting friendships languish because maybe this week, like last week, and the week before, and the week before, we're just so busy. But the researchers at Harvard have also found that small, steady acts of attention, phone calls, shared meals, expressions of gratitude, moments of just honesty, those accumulate into what we call resilience. Those are the acts that sustain people into old age not just with health of body, but with laughter and love. Our tradition knows this for a long time as well. The daily blessings of Judaism, Modeh Ani upon waking up, Birkat HaMazon after eating, Shema before going to sleep, these are rituals of attention. They anchor us in gratitude, in being present, in relationship with someone. They're small stitches, but over time, they hold our lives together. So too in our human relationships, it is not always the grand gestures that matter most, but just the daily and ordinary tendernesses. Which brings us back to today. What is Yom Kippur, if not a yearly reset? A day that forces us to pause, to strip away distractions, and to ask what really matters. Unatana Tokef shakes us awake to the fragility of life. Torah and Talmud point us toward covenant and community. Jewish tradition reminds us of our ethical responsibilities to others. Harvard confirms with data what faith has always proclaimed, that happiness comes from these relationships. And so it's sundown tonight when the shofar blows, when the fast ends, when we step out into the night air. The real question should not be whether we said every word in the machzor. The question should be, one of the many questions should be, are we freshly reoriented to the pursuit of a life well lived? Are we committed and recommitted to the relationships that make life full? I'd like to offer 3 brief invitations, ways that perhaps we could live this teaching when the gates close tonight. First, go repair one relationship. Think of one person with whom you need to make teshuvah, or whom you simply want to talk to again after whatever it was, politics or religion or personal connection, caused a rift. Make a phone call or write a letter or an email. Just start a conversation. Just take a first step. We cannot control the outcome of our lives or of our teshuvah, but we can open the door to it. Second, invest in maintenance. Choose one relationship that you already cherish and commit to nurturing it more intentionally. Set a regular dinner. Set a walk in the park together. Just check in each week. Just build those habits that sustain love and stitch us together. And third, widen your circle. Remember that meaningful relationships are not only private, they are also communal. Show up for synagogue. Show up for your neighbors. If you don't know them, go meet them. Show up for those who need support, because belonging comes not only from family, but from our community. Perhaps every person in this room already knows all of this, believes all of this. That's fine by me. As one of my beloved teachers, Rabbi Richard Levy of blessed memory, used to tell us over and over again in seminary, choirs need preaching too. And Yom Kippur is not easy. It is not meant to be. Its purpose is not suffering, its purpose is reorientation. And that is a lesson worth hearing over and over again. None of us know what this year will bring. Unatana Tokef is right. Some of it, much of it, most of it is beyond our control. But there is something this much in our hands, that how we live with each other, how we mend, how we tend, how we cherish, that is ours to grab hold of. The purpose of all that we do and say and bless on Yom Kippur is to emerge at sundown tonight, reoriented to the pursuit of a life well lived, a life made happy by the fullness of deep and meaningful relationships, which we commit to tenderly and carefully maintaining. Our tradition is clear. No one is really meant to be alone, at least not for long. There is a reason why even when we pray by ourselves, we still use the language of us and ours. Our God, God of our ancestors, bless us. In Jewish tradition, no one is ever really alone. Not in this moment, and not even across time. Today's Torah portion, Nitzavim, just reminded us that where one Jew stands, all Jews stand, those of us alive today and those of us who are not yet alive or any longer. So let this be the day that we find the courage to begin the repair, the patience to maintain, the love to widen our circles, Let us step into this new year reoriented, renewed, and ready to live fully, and to fill our days, whether many of them or few of them, with the loving relationships that we all know bring happiness and meaning, and even a little bit of redemption to the world. Ken Yehi Ratzon, let that be God's will.